All right, so we're going to work through an animated scene in Afterburner. And scene locators can be either stationary or moving in a scene. And we'll do this video with an animated scene. Stationary scenes are similar, but they're simpler as there's no timeline to take into account. But they work about the same way. So the Afterburner installer creates a desktop shortcut. So go ahead and start up Afterburner by double-clicking it. And we're going to process this clip. It's from a shoot, scene 101, take 22, from a shoot from Cat and Kyle on October 27th. So we'll take a look at the live action comp. There's a cool part where she's driving around, arcing around some rocks, going back and forth. All right, great. So here is the corresponding live action clip with a somewhat gruesome green screen. But the scene locator in this scene is right on that stationary seat that she's sitting on, and that's what helps everything line up. And so this brings up an important point that may come up with complex scenes like this. And we'll pull up the scene in Blender. The scene has two separate view layers. One is used for the main rendering scene, which is the one we're in right now, called View Layer. And this one has a scene locator named SceneLoc Center Seats, which makes sense. And there's also a separate view layer called iPhone, and that's for the USDZ export, so it's simplified. Now in this particular case, we weren't able to copy the scene locator from the original file over, and so we had to make another scene locator that was situated at the same spot. But since Blender doesn't allow two objects in the scene to have exactly the same name, then the scene locator in the proxy file is going to be very slightly different than the scene locator in the rendering blend file. And so we'll show you how to account for that in Afterburner. All right, so we'll switch that back. So make sure you have your scene set to view layer as it defaults to that to render it. We'll have more flexibility on that later, but for now, make sure it's your scene is saved with view layer active. So in Afterburner, we're going to set our Blender executable. We're going to set that, and we're going to use the special Omniverse build of Blender and just into our D drive. So we're going to go Blender 3.4, release, and then pick our Blender executable. Now for the directories, we're going to pick our output directory. And output is where it writes all the file sequences and the render files and the blend files, etc. So we're going to set that. And in this case, I've got a shared drive called Flamenco Projects. I'm going to pick Zorig as my top folder and I'm going to do the same thing with temp. That's where it puts the other temp files. All right, Project Zorig, great. And now for the project file, we want to set that to the parent directory of your iCloud shoots. In this case, the file was shared to my iCloud drive as a folder level, not as a project level. So I actually have to set it to my iCloud parent folder. So iCloud drive. And then we'll see something that affects below. For the AI map, we have an option of either ModNet or PP matting. I'm going to pick PP matting. For the engine, we're going to leave it at Blender Eevee. For the resolution, we're going to leave that as default. In that case, it will set Blender's rendering resolution to the same as the camera original file. And for day, this was automatically populated when I set our project parent directory. It looked for all the dated folders underneath that, and it lets me pick which date we're going to work with. So we're going to work with October 17th, and it gives us a list of all the different takes that are in that folder. We're going to pick this one, scene 101, take 22. And that populates this next file. And that tells us which USDZ file was used to shoot this particular take. In this case, it was called Stage Preenvelope 4. And what we want to do here is we want to pick a blend file that then correlates to this particular USDZ file. And in later builds of this, we'll have this automated. But for now, we'll do this manually. So we're going to set that. We're going to pick our subversion file that we used, which is Stage Preenvelope 4. That's unsurprisingly the blend file that originated from. Click that. And for our scene loc, we're going to, as we saw in the main rendering view layer, the scene locator we want to use is called SceneLoc Center Seats. And so we're going to enter that. And then we're going to leave it at 0 degrees. So this next setting is used only for animated files. And when you export a USDZ file, an animated USDZ file from Blender, it gives you the option of what frame of the Blender timeline to begin and end the export. And so in order to get the motion to match up between your real-time live action comp and the regenerated comp in Afterburner, you're going to need to enter the same timeline start frame here that you originally entered when you exported that USDZ file. This is another thing that we'll automate over time, but for now just write it down and enter it here. And in this case, we exported that USDZ file starting at frame 3400. And the camera start frame is the frame of the actual take that you want to begin processing on. And since our take was set so that we started recording at timeline frame 3400. I'm going to have our camera start frame at 1. You can leave the camera end frame at 10,000. That's just a large number. Now we can go to our next setting. The first thing that Afterburner is going to do is it's actually going to take those recorded H.265 files for the camera original and the depth files, and it's going to extract PNG image sequences for those, and it's going to generate AI matte-based mattes off of that image sequence. And you typically only need to do that once. However, if you want to rebuild them, you can check this box. CL Blender output will actually show all of the Blender output over into this debug console. Render CG renders will automatically tell Blender to render out the CG sequence into a set of EXR files and then generate a FFmpeg preview file from that automatically if you check this. And the same with the final composite pass. It will switch several of the real-time switches to post-production in the composite, and it will use that for the final compositing pass. Now, we're going to see more of this detail later on, so you don't need to worry about that right now, so you can leave those unchecked. And disable audio will remove audio from the output. And this all looks fine. So then we can click Save and Run. And as you can see, it's going through. All right, so it's processing. And the first thing it's going to do, so if we go into this folder, it's created a new folder, and it's created a whole file hierarchy for this. AI mattes, which is where the AI mattes are going to go. The cam PNG, which is where the camera original PNG still frame sequence will go. Depth is for the depth files. Preview is where the generated H.264 preview of the composite will go if you had checked CG renders or comp pass. And meta tracking and videos are just where the original take videos and data are copied over. And so as we can see, we can look into our cam PNG, and we're going to see a whole image sequence generated from our still image files. So we'll take a look at this. There's our still image sequence, and at the same time, it is going to go through and it's going to generate the AI mattes. We look in our AI matte sequence, and we see our nice black and white mattes being generated. Great. After it's generated the AI mattes, it's going to reference in the original blend file that we specified, and it's going to create an entirely new blend file that combines both the original scene and a new animated camera and a live action composite with everything synchronized. All right, so you can see here that it finished doing that. It did not create a Blender comp file because we didn't tell it to render the frames. You can ignore that error for now. So this is the generated Blender render file. So let's open that up in our special build of Blender. We go down to our renders, our blend subdirectory. There it is. Let's open that. All right. So now we've come into the viewport, double check that we're in our material preview or rendering mode. And then we can click on our compositor, and there's our real-time comp. So we hit play. You can see that it's driving through the scene. All right. Okay, great. And we're going to go into details of this on the next video.